Ka tira e tātou mā te hanga nei ko o te wahanga ki a tātou tikanga. Nā reira me huri atu ki te hui ātau, tēnā no koutou ko tai mai nei. Koutou katoa, e rongo atu ana ngā tangata whai pānga ki roto matawaia, i roto opahi, taete ki taia mai Ngati Rangi, i roto oro mahoe, e nao ngā whānau katoa, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody, welcome to this annual general meeting for 2020. Annual general meetings, as has already been expressed in the mihi mihi, is a time to open up the books and reveal as much as we can about what the trustees and the management and all of our associated parties like our accountants. And on that basis, I'd like to acknowledge Laurel Surley from Sias Hamilton Pool, who is our accountant for the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust, who's come and joined us today and will be speaking. You'll see her later on, but I'll get her to stand up for a start so you can see Laurel. So, out of the 7 trustees who have been elected, as far as I can see, there are 6 trustees in the whare, of which we got Peter Keretene, Sherrington, Len Bristow, Edward Beattie, Ernest Morton, Jim Baker over there, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Te Waihoroi. Kei heke rani Te Waihoroi e ngaro ana. So we've got our accountant here, 6 out of the 7 trustees. Huhana Linden is over here, as you know, is our CEO. Ian McClellan is our administration manager, does all the work. And then we've got Cheyenne Heke, who's also been engaged. Tēnei kōtiro e mokopuna na hare Shortland, Rauko Kupai. So it's good to have Cheyenne on board. Rowena's sitting down the back, has also been involved in our training for ngā mahuri. Can you stand up please, Rowena? Kia kite ai te iwi i a koe. Kia whanasta. And also, I'll mention him a little bit later on, Jim Ngawati, who's been working with us on our Manuka honey. So, kia ora, Jim. So, annual general meetings, like any annual general meeting in Ngati Hine, land amalgamated, we must have at least 10 or 12, like Opahi, Okaroro, and I see some of the trustees in here, Pokapū, right over to 2B and Pipiwai, Mohinui and Waihomio. There's a lot of land trusts throughout Ngati Hine, and this is the time of the year. I know some hold their AGMs at different. This is the time to open up the books, face the scrutiny, allow you as the owners of the whenua to ask questions about money. Why are you making this decision? So, as Kaumātua Mataroria has said, the questions are going to be coming at you, and that's what we're here for. When you make decisions, you've got to face up to the questions and the scrutiny. So we're here to be with you. It's not as though it's you and us. Ko tātou katoa tēnei. So in saying that, a few things, we do have a quorum. I've been assured of that, so I'll declare the annual general meeting for 2020 open. I presume that everybody got a newsletter, but if you haven't got one of the booklets, one of these, there's still certainly some on the front table, because the presentation that I'm about to give follows in sequence from page 2 to page 15. So my presentation is only summarizing the words in chronological order. If I can draw your attention to the front of the book, the photo on the front, yeah, these are our people. Like you might recognize the fellow on the far right, that's Mita Kopa. He was one of our oldest trainees. I think he's in his 50s. But Manuka tangata, that he was always the fittest one and the first one, and all the young fellas on the training course all looked up to Mita. So we thought it was an appropriate photo to put on the front of our book. There's what I'm a little bit worried about is that you might when the rako were first getting planted, not so much on that particular hill, because a lot of the trees that were planted on it were native. But ki te atu ana koutou, huri pērā ke ana te whare. Because the whare hui is turned around this way now. So you might have been looking at the photo saying, nah, that's not Otiria Marae. So this was a ceremony held when the first rako were planted in the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust. My point being that some of these little tamariki, who these older ones were looking out for, are now, could even be in the room, for all I know. It's thinking ahead to the next generation. Next one, please. This is a well-known photo of Nani Runa. She was one of the ones that's on top of the hill. And there's Runana in the background, and Pirikafi. And they were planting the first rako for the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust. Nani Rina raised wasi, of course, amongst maybe 30 or 40 tamariki. So, for me, it's if I can put it this way, Nani Rina and my grandmother are sisters. So while I got the tipene number plate, I also got the parane and the kopa number plate as well. But it's a little less seen. So to the point where we named one of our mokopuna after Nani Rina. But my point being, looking ahead, we're into 2020. So you know that's 40 years, my Mototo school maths tells me. That's how far they were planting those trees, thinking ahead for future generations. And that's what we as trustees on your behalf have been making decisions as well. Is trying to think way ahead of ourselves. So our vision statement, te pai tapiti, e whenua hua he tangata ora. We do want productive lands. We're going to go into the detail of this later on, and people well-being. And what we call our kaupapa, or our mission, is to be active. And I'll tell you what the opposite of active is. It's been the last 30 years of the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust, because by and large the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust leased out everything to others to run. But we're saying those days are over. We want our own people to run our own business. And that's why when I introduce some of the people in our Ngati Hine Forestry business, you'll note they're all from whānau from here. Because it's too easy to bring in contractors from somewhere else to come in and work on our whenua, and all you see is trucks of logs going down to the port, and the logs going overseas, and the logs are going past the mill down here at Moerewa, where our people work. Those days, according to the current trustees, are over. So when we say our mission is to be actively, we got to be active. We can't watch other people doing our mahi and getting the income and ultimately getting kai on the table for the whānau. So You might say, oh, well, we haven't seen anything yet. Well, I'm saying there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing you're going to do where all of a sudden it's all going to change. It has to be small change, day by day, week by week, month by month. So I just wanted to highlight this kaupapa to you. Next one, please. The report starts off with a summary. I can say that we're in a much better position than we have been for years. And we are growing the asset on your behalf. Mataroli has already had a dig at us for getting into the housing, getting out of housing and getting more into kiwi fruit. The reason being, we found the return on your money to be much better in kiwi fruit than it is in housing. There's a trade-off, of course, between that, but we find we can grow your money faster with kiwi fruit than with housing. The Mahuri o Ngati Hine, which is the training course, you can see there for yourself, if you can see that part, because I'm struggling from here. Last year we had 20 trainees, and this year we had another 20, and we had a 100% pass rate. Last year, out of the 20 trustees, 18 got into work straight after. 2 went on to further training, and this year it's similar as well. In terms of the bottom one, the Crown Forestry right, the whenua of Ngati Hine Forestry Trust is under a joint venture, management venture, because the land will never go anywhere. The land will always belong to you. But managing the land, and I'll talk a little bit more about the detail of the forestry right a little bit later on. My point on this slide being, things are looking much better, but we're not taking anything for granted as trustees of Ngati Hine Forestry Trust. Next one. We're going to go into the details a little bit later on and dig right into the details and allow you to ask questions. The income, you can see it for yourself, is 4.8 million, and the expenditure was about 1.6 million, and the net surplus was 3.2, roughly. Now, you might say, that's a hell of a profit. We'll also tell you what happened with the tax, and that's why we bought Laurel as well. If we can't answer any of the questions, you best get a point of view from somebody who's a bit independent of us as trustees. But yeah, it's always good to get an independent view, and you can ask questions of her as well. This mosaic land use, I always, and Peter Keretene described it for us last week. It's like a quilt that you got on your bed, where you have different shapes on your quilt and different colours. We're looking at the land of Ngati Hine Forestry Trust, of which there's 5,500 hectares, that over time you don't want pine to be all over it. It's a quilt with one colour. No, that's what we don't want. Because the soil is different in different places, because some areas are better at growing something than something else. What we're looking at is over time that we mix the land use up. So we've already planted about 500 hectares of Manuka, and eventually we want to take the whenua back to native, not pine. But it's not going to be something that we do overnight or even in a few years. So by planting 500 hectares of Manuka, you know as well as I do that it's a nursery crop and it helps other trees to come through. But in the meantime, we can also make money out of the honey, Manuka honey or Manuka oil, or even rongo. So we're looking to change what's on the land. And when you start seeing that change, you'll know how ke te tino kaupapa. So on this one here, we're even looking at growing kai, as in mahinga kai. We're not quite sure how that'll work, but why would you grow trees on perfectly flat pieces of ground that are very fertile? Doesn't make sense. So we don't want to just keep growing pine all the time. That's the message. Next one. But we still do have pine trees, and contrary to some thoughts that pine is not good for the whenua, we talk to people, whether they be scientists or those people who look at it culturally. Pine is actually good for the land, and certainly it has done well for the whenua up to this point. So it's not going to disappear in a hurry, but we do have a long-term view of what we want the whenua to be. Probably it's not going to be in my lifetime. So the Crown Forestry right, Shane Jones didn't get back into government, nor did Winston. But when they got in 3 years ago in 2017, Shane Jones, you'll remember, came in wanting to grow 1 billion trees. So we approached him. We struck a deal with the government, and we are moving to replant the whenua, and the joint venture is for 1 rotation only. The government will plant a 3rd rotation at its own cost, which will be owned 100% by you. If I can contrast that with the regime over the last 30, 40 years, when all of the whenua of Ngati Hine was planted, by and large, the company that we leased the land to, which is Taumata Plantations, you'll recognize them as Hancock, they leased the land and they will hand all the whenua back by next year, October next year, Ian. By October next year, the lease would have been totally handed back to the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust. Now in that time, they had 100%, in other words, for every tree they took 100% of the value. What we got was a lease fee, an annual fee, averaged about yeah. So say average out at about $400,000 per annum. Hancock paid the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust all that time a lease fee. And then when they took the trees, all the value went somewhere else. Next rotation, over 50% of the stumpage, and in the 3rd rotation, you get all of the stumpage, 100%. Now, here's my calculations. We might have received $400,000 as a lease fee per annum from Hancock. Your maths is as good as mine. When you see all those trucks going down to the wharf in Marsden Point, it would have been in the vicinity of about $150 million. So you can see the value that's leaving our community. But when I say that that sort of setup has to stop, it has stopped. But moreover, when you're in control of the trees, you're also in control of where they go to. So you're more able to set up industry in your own towns, in your own areas, and instead of the log going over to China, and then you buying it back in the warehouse, pine on them, and some private owners have pine on them as well. My point on this slide is that the whole of the Ngati Hine H2B block is about 5,500 hectares, but you also have forests within a forest. So you have the Matawaya forest, which is basically from about the Marae, Matawaya Marae, right down to about James Road. For those of you who know Matawaya, that's the stretch of the Matawaya forest, of which it's 416 hectares. And then you get the Ruatangata forest, which is, for those of you who know where Ruatangata is, where the Wahi Tapu is, heading over towards Pipiwai there. It's 431 hectares. So some of these forests within the H2B block have their own regime. They have their own way of running it. We'll go on to the slide. Matawaya Forest, as I say, is 351 hectares. The first rotation went into what they call Taitokero Forestry Limited. Taitokero Forestry Limited is made up of a whole lot of pine blocks, quite a few in Ngati Hine, but quite a few throughout the Taitokero. To give you an example, Kevin Prang, the Prangs Forest was part of TFL. Opapaki, over the top of the Otiria Marae, the Sherrington zone, that was it.
But unfortunately, that families and those owners in that time never got anything for what they gave the land for the use of the pine tree. I'm not talking for any arguments or anything like this.
Right.
But those were the rumours that was going around then on the first cut. And I thought I'll just mention this because there are a lot of the owners in that area, in the Moerewa area, including the Moerewa Marae area itself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora Otiria, of which the kuia in one of the first slides, Ngati Hine was one of them. My point is that the Matawaya block was under Taitokero Forestry, not under the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust. It was under a different regime of management with all those other blocks. And next one, please. I've covered this. Ngā mahuri o Ngati Hine is the 20 trainees this year, 20 trainees last year. Was our person who project managed it. And a really good program, Ngā mahuri o Ngati Hine. We're going to play a video. Yeah. We're going to show you a video of some of these young people.
Ngati Hine Forestry Trust administers over 5,000 hectares of whenua tūpuna on behalf of our beneficial owners. Our kaupapa is he ringa ahu whenua, he hanga mahi, to actively grow our assets. In partnership with Te Ururako, Ngati Hine Forestry Trust brings to you ngā mahuri o Ngati Hine.
Ko atu i te whārau hikitea te rahi o ngā whenua i roto i a Ngati Hine mō te whakatō Manuka. I tērā tauhia tauira hau ki roto i tēnei kaupapa, engari i tēnei tau, he kaimahia hau mō Recruit BNZ, he kaupapa rangatira ngā mahuri o Ngati Hine.
And all of me being paid for like training and like those jobs also taught me how to adapt to new surroundings.
We had to do this block twice, which was quite amazing. Thank you to Ben Paraha for the work, great experience.
Ngā Tangariki o Ngati Hine provides pastoral tautoko to the trainees of Ngā Mahuri o Ngati Hine, and my job is to support trainees throughout the program and help them overcome challenges and get them ready for the workforce.
Yeah, the training was pretty tough, managing time with my tamarikis and the kaupapa, but yeah, had to finish anyways.
So that's ngā mahuri o Ngati Hine. Coming back to the presentation. That's what we're preparing for in the future, is bringing our young people through and giving them the right training and education. So going on to the next slide. The emissions trading scheme is not something that's lost on you. It was legislation that was introduced to the country because of global warming, and all countries have bought into it. Some would say not enough, but certainly our government bought into it, and it put a layer of compliance on the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust, in that when you cut down your trees, you must replant. And when you replant, there's got to be a certain height, there's got to be so many trees per hectare, all those sorts of things. And believe it or not, people come through and they count them. So what the trust doesn't want to do is to have a liability of not planting and then having to pay the government back. But the good news is that there was a time when the emissions trading scheme first came out. Each unit was worth about $21. And then those of you who follow this will know it went right down to 50 cents, dropped right down. And then recently, over the last couple of years, it's come back up again. I think it's, well, there you go. It's about $32 per unit. So if you translate that into real dollars, currently priced, we're holding NZUs or New Zealand units worth almost $5.5 million in value, not in real dollars. And as per one of the annual general meetings some 6-7 years ago, you as the owner said to us as trustees, what the hell can the government force us to plant something on our land, and yet under Te Tiriti o Waitangi it says we have control of all of our taonga. So as a result of that kōrero, and it just shows that we do listen, is that we filed a Waitangi Tribunal claim against the government for forcing us into a regime that we don't want to follow. So that one here is still pending. If you want to look at it, the number is Y2397, because each claim has a number, and you can look it up.
And I've got a claim to do for the same thing.
Good. Oh, well, that's us together. In terms of Manuka honey, we've been moving into Manuka honey more and more. We find that Manuka honey is something that resonates with the people, in that it's environmentally friendly, all those sorts of things, and we can have Manuka on the whenua as part of the mosaic approach. So what I can say is that the last year, and Jim Ngawati and his whānau, who work really hard on the hives out on the whenua, will tell you that the last season for Manuka has been the best one, but it couldn't have got any worse, because the last few seasons have been absolutely terrible, weather-wise, and for whatever reason, our take of Manuka honey hasn't been that flash at all. But this last season is better. I've underlined this wholesale, because it's another thing when we say we're actively moving into this industry, we don't want to be selling honey in drums. Because the real value is when you sell them wholesale, sell it by drum, and you sell it to a distributor or a retailer, when you go and buy it, you buy it in a jar that big, and it's about $30. So where we're moving to is to move into that sort of regime ourselves, but more importantly, to tell our own stories, so that when you see the name on the jar, people in Ngati Hine will resonate with the name, instead of seeing other people's names and other people's stories. So what we're saying is that we're not even getting true value if you're selling it in a drum wholesale. The other big thing is that some of the government regulations are not helping us either. They've come up with a Manuka definition. They test it scientifically, and if it doesn't meet the criteria, they say it's actually not Manuka, even though the bees have been foraging on only Manuka. Some of you might have seen this because we're kicking up merry hell about what, because in the end this penalises you. And we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't kick up and go to the media and give the government a hard time to change their regulations. Another thing that we're doing is working with others who are in the Manuka industry. You'll see some of names in here, Te Rarawa, Te Uriohau, Te Roroa, Ngati Wai. They probably got almost as much Manuka, which as far as I know, Herbie, we didn't even call it Manuka when we used to chop it down. Well, the word I remember was kahikatoa. Yeah. But we're looking to work with others because while we might think we're a big fish, we only are in a big pond, we're very little fish. So we can get with others who have got a lot of Manuka honey and sell it together, then we're stronger. I don't know if any of you are involved in the Manuka honey industry, but what we don't want is for other companies coming from outside of Toi Tokero, taking all the honey and taking it somewhere else and processing it and selling it somewhere else. We want, just like the trees, to have the value stay in Moerewa, Kawakawa, Matawaya and all of our values. One of the things that I am on behalf of us, is I'm on the Manuka Trust. Our job is to look after the name Manuka, because hihi ana wetahi no tā wāhi ki te taha I te kupu, te ingoa. Our friendly Australians are trying to take the word Manuka. So you got to fight them in court, you got to do the science, and I'm on this committee, and it's a national committee to do exactly that, is to protect. And look, it's not just Manuka, because slowly but surely others are wanting to come in and try and tahai a whole lot of our rongoa and our names. So we're starting with that one, Manuka. I put up a couple of photos. Lucky you're in one of them. But it's, this is one of my fellow trustees. You might recognize his face. It's Tamaiti. So when you get different ones from throughout the country, our job, and there's 7 of us, there's 9 of us all up, is to protect the term Manuka. This one here I put up on Ngati Hine Forestry Marae is my point of saying it's important that the value comes back to the people, but also our stories have to be told. And people like Ngati have got the kōrero. By the same token, we don't want to sell our kōrero, so we've got to be very careful about those sorts of things. But this photo of drums and jars, if you sell, as I've already made, you sell your honey in a drum to somebody, and they break it down into jars and put their own symbols on it, our value is going somewhere and we don't even know it. We're getting there. We've set up a company called Hine Ora Limited. Hine Ora being a play on Ngati Hine, coined by none other than Ernest. It was a joint venture company, and it focuses on nutraceutical. Tēnā kupu, te nutraceutical, it's really just food that over and above its nutritional value gives some sort of a health benefit. So, pene nei te rongo. So, nutraceuticals is the kaupapa of Hine Ora Limited. The 2 directors that we've put on it are Ernest and Len. So they look after that part for us. Initially it was 60% shareholding with another company that looked into the research and was looking at some of the benefits of our native rako, because what we know is if we return the whenua to native, you fellas would say, oh, that's all well and fine, but what about return? So you've got to try and find a way of getting a return on the native rākau ngā rau without selling your soul. Recently we've bought out the other company, so we now own it 100%, and we're doing a business plan. That's what Ernest and Len are leading on our behalf. How can we make get a return on some of our rākau that you know well enough yourselves as rongoa. I only know the well-known ones, the Kumarahau, the Tupakihi, but this is a photo of what some of those nutraceuticals might look like. So my point is, we're moving into this. It's not the first time I've reported on it, but we're moving into nutraceuticals as well. Mena he whakaaro wā koutou, we'd like to know.
Are we going to be given a presentation from the directors from that company today while we're here?
No, but they're quite willing to talk about it. Yeah. Did you want it now?
Oh, well, I'm just asking you. You're bringing it up that we're a 100% shareholder of this newly developed company. Are we going to get a presentation on it? Or?
Oh, let's hear that.
I'm a Maori doctor. Thanks for the question. Mihe tōna kia koutou akwa taito muri mai te kalakianga lea mihe tōna kia koutou e tuake nei e mua ia koutou ki te hakapoka. Utu i ngā pātai o te kai pātai. Look, Hine Ora, as you know, is a new organisation that we thought that might be in the best interest of the stuff that we've got around in our country, in our community, and the idea of setting this up and starting this up is to be the first one off the rank instead of a Chinaman from overseas and coming in and doing this same thing and claiming it to be there. So, as a trustee for the Ngati Hine Forestry Trust, we thought that this was a good opportunity for us to get into and do the research into what we can, the product that we can come out with this, with our mamaku and tupaki and all of those wrong. But just as I went to a doctor yesterday, and he's riddled with eczema. And I said, I got the medicine for you, boy. I gave it to him yesterday. He rang me this morning. Lenny, I want to talk to you. See, and this is opening up this for us. And in regard to this mamaku, we're trying to make a product, and we've already sent the research out to people in the community. Or how would they think a trial period for coming up with a pill or a lolly or something that could help people to lose weight. Well, I know the easiest way is to stop eating, but I know that's hard for us to do, and we thought we'll try this product and put it out to our people, and there's a big interest. There's a big interest out there. So these are the things, exciting things that we're trying to do for you guys that are shareholders in your land or in your shares. No, Ernie might have a bit more. He's more of a doctor than I am. He's a surgeon.
Kia ora. You know, just tautoko what Len says. Basically, Hine Ora, the name Hine Ora derives out of, I guess, Hine, Ngati Hine, and it also derives out of the concept of Hine being Hine Ora being your thinking, Hine Ngaro, sorry, and it's usually the woman that has the insight to things like, for instance, if her husband is watching the rugby and the kids are in the room, she can tell what the score is, know what the kids are doing in the room, and even concentrate on what she's doing herself. So she's got that insight, if you like. So that's the Hine Ngaro. Now, if we look at what some of our taonga out there, the Hine order means that we are going to bring that which was lost back into orangatanga. So therefore, we're bringing that, the revelation of the past, back into the future through Hine Ora. And those are sort of the background of that name. And one of the trustees says, so why is it Hine Ora? I'm not going to buy the product. And I said, you never do. Your wife buys it for you. So we've been progressing this respectfully with the tikanga of our Maori concept with the ngahere, because, you know, I can still remember the pātangatanga and the tāwhara. I remember the old people boiling the cracker berries in those days and eating like peanuts, te puku puku o reo toi te o ngā rito, the Maori peanut, getting rito for us up there in Matawaya. I remember all those things, not to mention the kuku, we won't talk about that one. But I thought this is a concept of bringing back what basically that we have as a taonga and integrating into something for us. So we want to be the first cab off the rank and take control of who we are with our taonga and set it up for our next generation. So this is part of our mosaic approach. We've recently been down to Plant and Food in Palmerston North and had a look at the scientific analysis on some of these concepts. Also down to Callaham's in Wellington. It's very, if I can use the word, Pākehā word, fascinating to see some of the thinking of some of these scientists. And so we're integrating it so that we can come out with something that we can be in possess of, and it could be put it this way, it could be worldwide, but we're progressing on it slowly, and we're going to keep you informed with the steps that we do so that we're doing it with tikanga. Nō reira, tēnā koutou.
The Marae grant scheme that we currently have are for marae that are affiliated to the shareholders of Ngati Hine Forestry. They're all available on the website. You can have a look. And that includes some marae mangakahia, our whānau and Waitangi, Waimate Taimai area and ourselves. But the marae insurance issue is a biggie that keeps being raised. Right now there's limitations within our trust deed again, so we've got structural issues to work through, with the SGM being a really important space for us to bring these matters and clarify. But then ultimately many of our marae aren't insured today. Many of our marae are underinsured, as Auntie's already pointed out, $16,000 here, but it's not for the whakairo. So we need to look at a workable solution, but that we do have local investment and we retain the resource here. So taking that message really clearly, but there needs to be some work done in preparation for the SGM. So we do have affiliated marae, and they're on our website, and the policy is on the website as well. It closes at the end of January 2021 for marae who are keen to apply. Please get in touch with our office. We're keen to sit down and talk to you about what we can currently fund, but the matter of insurance is something that's right on our scope right now because of COVID impact, but also understanding many of our marae aren't insured, and so that is a real risk for us right now. So that's just a response there. It's do close at the end of January 2021. Kia ora.
Did that answer your question, Rowena? Okay. All right, so that's marae grants. Next slide, please, Huhama. Ngā whenua rāhui. The Kawenata was signed in 1998, and to protect the areas of native forest. So when Sissy's talking about those areas of forest, the biggest area of native forest within the Ngati Hine Forestry block is up the valley here, called Te Totara block. So it protects all of the historical values. Sometimes when you look at Ngati Hine Forestry Trust, it's not just all pine. That's a big block, Te Totara. So the Kawenata covers an area of about 570 hectares of native forest, and in 42 blocks all up, not just Te Totara. And the term of the Kawenata is for 25 years, and it expires in July 2023. So this, what we signed up to, protects those native, so that it really does protect them. Kore tae te tangata, te haere mai ki te tango i ngā raka, ki te tua i ngā raka. We are doing a pest control program. In that case, I mean the animal pests. The vision here, as coined by Te Waihoroi Shortland, kia hoki mai te kete a ngā manu ki ngā ngahere o Ngati Hine, so that we can hear the bird song in the forest. Because at the moment you can go to some places, you won't hear it at all. So there's 600 hectares of kawenata, as I've already said. We really want to get in seriously into the pest control. We know that a lot of our people in Ngati Hine are very good at it. But like anything, like Bridget said, we've got to work through a process. We've also got an environmental roku that we need to work with as well. And the pest control, in terms of intensive pest control, we're trying to find the areas that we can best work in. And as we know, just because there's a fence line, the possums and the rats don't stop at the fence line. So we've got to work with our neighbours as well. So we just want to alert you to the fact that we are getting into pest control in a big way. And this is the juicy slide. Yes, at its discretion. And the work plan to establish a system of administration, policies and processes will be set up. So it's a big job. It's not just something you just get the bank account and pay out. No. You've got to see what the shareholding is. And it can be anything from over 30,000 to the bigger shareholders to 0.5 of the smaller shareholders, of which there's a lot of very small shareholdings. And if you're going to pay out on 0.5 of a share, it's looking like 50 cents. So we've got to make sure that we've got the machinery in place to pay out the dividends. But we're looking at wider avenues to get benefits back to the shareholder, to you, the owners, as well. Now, I know that doesn't give you the certainty, but what we do plan to do, like I've already said, is that in about May of next year, to have a special general meeting to talk about these very things, so that when we come to the next AGM, things are much clearer about how we're going to pay a dividend, what's going to be the sum, etc., etc. So to sum up this part of the presentation, ngā mahuri o Ngati Hine has been probably the highlight, because we get all of our young people in, and not even young people. As I said, Mita was about 54. And so the overview of this slide is that, once again, things are going pretty good, but we're still not out of the woods.